Welcome back, everybody. This week's Parsha is Parshas Tisa. The learning that we're doing today is in memory of Reb Yoel Torjman Ben David and Sarah, who inspired us to come learn Parsha together. And the ideas are largely Reb Yoel's ideas that I'll be sharing today are largely his. Obviously, there are some other different parts and pieces that get that his lesson evolves to, but the lesson always starts with Reb Yoel's teachings. So this week's Parsha is Parshas Kisisa, and there are two main topics that are in this Parsha: the half a shekel that we all were given to the Mishkan, and the golden calf. We spoke about the golden calf a few weeks ago and the chronological parts of it. So here it is happening in real time in the Parsha. And the Parsha starts off in the very first pasuk. Actually, I don't know if it's the first pasuk. Right away, it talks about everybody has to give machatzis shekel, which is half a shekel, and the wording of the pasuk is that it's used as a ransom for our soul. Now, the shekel was technically speaking given for the upkeep of the Mishkan. It also says that in the pasuk, and it kind of feels, as I was reading it, I was like, "Wow, this feels like our very first." Shul membership. Really, everything comes from the Torah, even a shul membership. But obviously this wasn't just a membership. There was significance to every part of it. In the amount that was given, in the way in which it was given, what it represented, what it was used for. And we'll explore a little bit of that. And I also feel like I need to say that it's just a little bit of it because there's so much significance and so much Torah to be learned in every single little aspect, even just the amount that we were given. We were given 10 and it was different parts of it. And we're literally just scratching the surface of all of the wealth of knowledge and goodness and Torah that there is just from this one little chapter. But the machatzis shekel was a way of counting, essentially. That was the function of it. And it was a necessary donation for every single person. There was nobody that was exempt from it. And the part of the significance was that we all have different ways of showing up in the world. We all have different strengths, different levels of intellect, different talents, different lights that we share with the world. But in that, past our uniqueness, there is something that's universal about all of us. And that is that we were all created by God and we all are connected to Him in the same exact way. Whether we're conscious of it or not, whether we're active or not, this is like a birthright that we all have. And so everybody had different ways that they were helping with the Mishkan. And if you read through the Parsha of the Psukim, it's giving out jobs, and some people helped and some people didn't. And some people were doing manual labor, some people were sewing. Some people were building. There were all sorts of jobs and ways to show up and to participate. But every single person had to give this equal amount of silver. And it was used for the sockets of the foundation, which is the foundation of the foundation, which signifies that in our foundation with God, we're all the same. We're all equal in that fundamental level. Every single person is needed, whether you helped or you didn't, whether you worked hard or you did some things that seemed a little bit less significant. Every single person was equally as valued in the eyes of God. And I can't give more than you, and you can't give more than me, because they're the universal parts of us, which are, by the way, which are our essence, and the most beautiful parts of us are what God says, this is what's significant. And so it's universal, and all of us in our true essence, we really are more alike than different, because in our essence, which is the most valuable part of ourselves as Jews, as women, as human beings, we all have this commonality. And this is what is being counted here. Now, the half of a shekel, if you're talking about half of something, it implies that there's a second half. If we're saying give a half of a shekel, it implies that there's a second half somewhere else. So the question is, where's the other half? And we get that answer by way of the golden calf. Now, what was the golden calf? The eagle was created to fulfill our desire for a tangible connection to God. We had the purest of intentions. It was a means to an end of getting to God. But our purest intention led to the biggest blunder and pitfall from the highest of highest graces of our biggest, and like we fell from the highest of highs of our biggest enlightenment. So how did that happen so fast? We were just at Har Sinai in this oneness with God. How did it happen that so quickly we're falling onto the lowest of lows of suddenly serving an idol? Like, how did that happen? So the first thing to keep in mind seems like obvious to me. Where there is light, darkness always can come. There's always an option, no matter how high you are. And this is the quintessential example in the Torah of being so enlightened, so inspired, so connected to yourself, to God, to your purpose in the world. They were right out of Har Sinai, and yet this still was possible to happen. So it's never a time to just be lackadaisical about things, so to speak. It's important to always stay vigilant and connected, and nobody is exempt from darkness coming into time, spaces, and creations of light. That's number one. And secondly, is that we weren't desiring to worship an idol. What we desired at this time was connection and oneness with God. But God is intangible, and we, as human beings, desired something physical, something tangible, in order that we could connect to God. It was a means to connecting to God. And in reality, technically, there is nothing wrong with this, because we are part physical, right? We are emotional, we are spiritual, we are physical. It's a part of us. And so our instinct is to crave physical connection, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, technically speaking, right? For example, like when I'm putting my son to sleep, he wants me in the room with him in his bed, right? He doesn't want my theoretical, intangible love that I have for him. The goal is for him to be okay without me physically being there, but even though, by the way, the intangible form of me is so much more powerful and so much more potent, right? The intangible, theoretical love that you have for somebody is so much more valuable than your physical body in presence. But we're physical people, and so we sometimes need physical objects to get us to that metaphysical space. Now, Moshe, up until this point, was filling this role because he was there, and he was our way of connection to God, which we spoke a lot about last week. And so he went up to go get the luchos, and now he was gone. And so in essence, they were being resourceful, and it wasn't a bad thing. But what happened was that instead of using the calf to connect to God, they ended up worshiping the calf itself as an idol. It's like when you have an initially pure intention of making money or creating an organization or doing any kind of good thing. And then when you get there, the ego somehow has a way of derailing you, right? It's human nature. It's basic human nature. And the example for us in the Torah is exactly this. It's obviously in the most extreme of ways, but this is the lesson that's in it for us, is that we constantly have to be checking in with ourselves. Call it cheshbon nefesh, call it realignment, whatever you want to call it. The lesson is to check in all the time. Is this a means to an end for me? Now that I've gotten where I'm trying to go, if the goal was to make money, if the goal was to create an organization, if the goal was to help old people, or whatever it is that you're passionate about, whatever's the driving force between you and your actions, constantly checking in of, is this a means to an end for me, or has the means become my end? Have I gotten derailed? Has my ego gotten in the way? Has the original pure intention turned into idol worship in some other form? So back to our question of what's the other half of the shekel. This is the other half of the shekel, and I'll explain. There is always a physical and a spiritual part, and the spiritual path, there's hopefully a spiritual path that drives our physical action, right? If we're talking about money, why are you making money? Is it so you can support your family? Is it so you can give tzedakah? Whatever the physical driving force is, there's the spiritual driving force is, the spiritual path, hopefully leads your physical action, and they intertwine over and over again. They keep on crossing over and bringing one back to the other one. And so to Reb Yoel Torjman in his book, a phenomenal Parsha book, that I've really, really been enjoying reading every week. Sorry. Okay, yes, everybody's muted. I just heard a noise. I'm nervous from last week. Reb Yoel Torjman Z quotes Rashi on this idea. And he says that this was exactly what the deeper meaning of giving the half a shekel was about, was that this was, the machatzas hashekel was a rectification for the ego, because it's showing us in physical form that when you have something physical, it's only half the picture. The ego was a means to God. It's not a problem on its own, but the ego on its own, no, sorry. The ego itself fundamentally is not a problem, but as a means to God is not a problem. But the ego on its own, yes, it became a huge problem, because it has to just be a tool. It has to just be a means to an end. And so when we were giving this physical form, it was this rectification of, this is the physical part, and the spiritual part is, this is only half of the picture. There's more to it, and that is me. That's me and you showing up in a spiritual sense. The physical part is just half of the picture. Now, Reb Yoel has a question that he asked on this parsha, and he said, "What happened after the golden calf?" Right? When me and you think of the story of the golden calf, when I think of the story of the golden calf, I know all about the punishment. I know all about the sin. I know about the downfall. I know about the dark negative. It's like this big horrible thing that we did, and this beautiful cocoon that we were in with Hashem, and this is how we behaved, right? And afterwards, it says in the pasuk, 3,000 people were killed. It wasn't no big deal. It was a huge, huge big deal. But do any of us know the aftermath of what happened, right? When we think of this story, does it end in this punishment? Because in reality, that's not really what happened. The story doesn't end there. What happens after we have this tremendous spiritual downfall and punishment and disconnection and darkness in our relationship with Hashem, what happens immediately after that is we get the luchos. We get the 13 midos harachamim in this parsha. We get Shabbos in this parsha. And those are the main outcomes. It's like saying when someone goes into labor, that when someone has a baby, that labor is the main event. Labor is not the main event. The birth is the main event, right? My child that comes out of giving birth, that's the main event. We have the 13 midos harachamim that we have the opportunity to say every single day. And it gives us an automatic reset with God all of the time. We have Shabbos at the end of every single week. Huge, huge, huge gifts. And that's the story. That's really what happened. And Reb Yoel's idea here is to shift the focus onto the gifts. How is it that the story of the eagle that we know is a story of darkness and disconnection and punishment? Yes, those things happened, but that wasn't the point of what happened. Now we question, what could we have gotten all of these gifts without this devastating scenario of the Egal? Was it necessary for us to deviate in such a harsh and drastic, terrible way in order to get these gifts from Hashem? Was the betrayal and the confusion and the heartbreak, right? And obviously, this goes to this translates to our individual lives also. It's not just talking, I'm not just talking about the Parsha. Were all of those challenges and pain and difficulty necessary parts in order to receive these gifts that Hashem is giving us? And the answer is yes, they are, because it's part of the journey, all of it, the ups, the downs. We can't we can't live life with regrets of and desires of things we prefer the hard parts don't happen to us, right? I don't know if you've ever been asked the question if you have any regrets in your life. I've been asked the question. And my answer, when I stop and think about, do I have any regrets in my life? Are there any things that I wish I wouldn't have experienced? Are there any choices I wished I wouldn't have made? Right. And when I think about that, well, the first thing that comes to mind is that I'm very young. And so there's so much more life and wisdom to learn. Like, I feel like I'm just at the beginning. So that's number one. But the truth also is that the answer is no. I don't wish away the bad parts. Not really, because when I sit with myself and I recognize the gifts that it brings me, and the hard parts always bring gifts, they don't come without gifts. How can I regret any single part of it? How can I regret any relationship, any home that I lived in, any trauma that I experienced at the hands of Hashem or at the hands of people, when it all led me to here? I couldn't have gotten here with any of it. And I don't mean that in a logical way. I mean that in like a real felt sense of, if you've experienced this, the desperation of waiting for something so terribly hard. And when you finally get it, you're a different human being than you were when you first started desiring what you so terribly wanted. And so I don't get here to this part of receiving the gifts without the hard parts. The hard parts are the things that got me here. They molded me, they shaped me, they literally created me. It's like challah dough. Like, I was making challah yesterday, and I was thinking this. It's like, bread doesn't come out of the oven until it's pushed and it's pulled, and then it rests, and then it goes through a whole process until I can put bread in my mouth. I mean, if we even go before that, right? There's a long journey of torture. We're punching the dough, we're twisting it, we're pulling it, we're putting it into the fire, we're heating it up, right? Like, that whole process is necessary to create something beautiful. And it's like that in life also. Had the honor of being at a birth last week, and it's similar to birth. Birth is such a microcosm for the way that life is and the way that we live and exist in this world. And like I said before, if the main event of birth is the child that comes of it, right? Could we have done without the weeks of pre-labor pain and all the sleepless nights and all the difficulties and the intense hours of labor? And then you finally get to this point of, it's like the biggest pain of your entire life. And you get to the climax of this ring of fire, and it's just, you're totally, totally helpless. And you feel like there is no greater pain. I can't do this. And then you get over and through, you don't get over, you go through that pain. You can't skip that pain. You can't skip those parts. They're part of creating a human being. They're part of bringing a soul into this world. And when you're at the other end of it, there's nothing about that you regret. There's nothing about that you say, well, I could have done without that. You couldn't have done without that. You don't get the gift without the labor. You don't get the present without the pain. it's particularly because you went through that most difficult part that you have a gift to show for it. And obviously, at the end of the story, at the end of the birth, at the end of our difficulty of looking for a partner, of having a child, of any desires of that we have in this world, at the end, do we talk about the pain or do we talk about the miracles? Obviously, they're both part of the story. But we talk about the soul that was born. We talk about the baby that is here now alive in the world. And so when the story is over, the lesson is let's put our attention to the good parts just as much as the hard parts. The hard parts are a part of your life story. They aren't parts to be skipped, but they're not the main event. They never are. The challenge and the pain and the difficulty is never the main event. It's never the point, whether it's big or small, right? From my son missing his bus in the morning to losing a parent. Both of those things are necessary. The teeny little annoyances and huge, massive loss in my life, both of those things are necessary and are part of the story, but they're not the main event. The main event is me and who I have become and the gifts that I have in my life because of those things. And they are 100% connected. One doesn't come without the other. And so the question to ponder is when you think about your life, when you stop and you have a story to tell, or when you think about how you exist in the world and the chapter of your life as you desire to, just like your own perspective on your own life, the question is what do you consider to be the main events, right? This is a thought to sit with. Maybe it's a journal prompt for you, maybe it's a conversation starter, but when you think about your life, what do you say? What do you feel? What is your life, the sum total of your life, feel like? What do you consider to be the main events? Tomorrow's Purim, obviously, and it's the last month of the year before, it's the last month before Geula. I don't want to say the last month of the year because the year starts on Rosh Hashanah, but also when you count months, it starts in Nisan. So we're at the end, and the path forward, regardless of if we're in the middle or the end, what comes after this is Geula. It's a whole month of redemption. And that's the next holiday that we're going to be leading into. And the path forward, the path to redemption, is enveloped and wrapped and just in tremendous joy, which tells me that it's really important to focus on the joy, because when you focus on the joy and when the main events of your life are the joy, obviously not to discount your difficulties, they're part of it and they're necessary parts of it. And the healed part of experiencing a trauma, big or small, is when you start seeing it as a gift in a real and true way, and the story somehow shifts into something that you love now, right? And so with Purim coming tomorrow, I want us to all have to focus in on the joy, focus in on the energy, take it with us, not just in this month and not just on this day, but in our hearts and minds, always in our ways of thinking, in how we view ourselves, how we view other people, how we move through the world. And I want to give us all a blessing that we all should live a life that we have the perspective and the desire to focus on our gift, because everything is a gift, even the things that feel really, really hard and deeply painful. And may we all have the ability to find our gifts, to show others their gifts, and to live a life that feels tremendously abundant, beautiful, and filled with gifts. Thank you, everybody, for learning Parsha with me.